Hi everyone, I'm Rob and I'm from Grappling with Crime. We're a new YouTube channel where we're going to talk about true crime, and this is our first episode. I really hope you like the content that I'm going to be putting out, so please like and subscribe as it's really going to help the channel to grow. Today we're going to look at the case of Suzanne Capper. Now I've chosen this case because it happened not too far from where I live, and it's a particularly harrowing case. Now if that's something that is going to put you off, that's absolutely fine. We'll be putting more videos out throughout the week, and we'd love you to join us for those. With that in mind, let's get started. The case of Suzanne Capper is a particularly harrowing and horrific one, as I've just mentioned, but it received strikingly little attention in the media as it happened around the time of another very famous case, the James Bulger case. Again, another absolutely horrific case, which I'm sure lots of you have heard of, and that basically completely overshadowed what happened to Suzanne. So Suzanne Capper was born in Manchester in 1976. She was described as gentle and an easily influenced child. So she often got into trouble at school and things like that, but was a gentle and well-liked child. In 1990, when she was around 14, her mother and her stepfather separated. Suzanne went on to stay with her stepfather, but was under the care of the local authority at the time, and that's kind of if you're in the UK, that's the sort of agencies that work with underprivileged children and children who are going through a difficult time. Now, during this time, her schooling was obviously affected, and her attendance has been described as erratic, and obviously this caused a number of problems for Suzanne. During this time, Suzanne began to spend more and more time at the house of her former babysitter, and this was a woman named Jean Powell. Now, Jean Powell lived in an area of Greater Manchester called Moston, in a small terraced house, which was at an address 97 Langworthy Road. Now, I'm not sure if that address is still standing or whether it was demolished after these events. I imagine it's still there. If you know, let me know in the comments below. Now, interestingly, Suzanne's older sister, Michelle, had actually lived with Jean Powell for a brief amount of time, but moved out because she was uncomfortable with the people that Jean Powell was associating with, who Suzanne's older sister actually described as evil. Now, one of these friends was a woman named Bernadette McNeely, who actually lived just a few doors down from Jean Powell. Now, Bernadette McNeely would eventually go on to move in with Powell, and Bernadette McNeely had 3 children, as did Jean Powell. So we've now got a total of 6 children in the house, as well as a number of other regular visitors who I am going to go on to talk about now. Now, you'll have to bear with me for the next part of this video, as I'm going to be discussing a section that has quite a lot of names in it, and as you'll get to know, I am utterly dreadful with names. I'm not too bad with a lot of other things, but names are just something that do not come naturally to me, so I will be checking my notes for this next bit. Now, there are a number of other regular visitors to the house, alongside Bernadette McNeely, who was now living there. Bernadette McNeely had her 16-year-old boyfriend, Anthony Dudson, regularly visit the house. As well as Anthony Dudson, there was a man named Clifford Pook, who was Jean Powell's brother, and we also had a man named Jeffrey Lee, who would purchase amphetamines and things like that. As well as this, we have Jean Powell's ex-husband, Glyn Powell, visiting the house, and although him and Jean had separated, they were still on good terms. Now, here's where the story gets a little more complicated. Jean Powell was involved in drug dealing, as I've previously mentioned, as well as other petty crimes such as dealing in stolen cars and things like that. She was also sleeping with Anthony Dudson, and she was sleeping with Jeffrey Lee. They were all involved, and it gets a little bit complicated at this point, but this kind of behaviour would eventually be what led to the torture and murder of Suzanne Capper. So I'd just like to apologise for the editing here. I actually lost one of the segments of this video, and I've had to come back and redo it at a different time. Also, my editing is not my strongest suit anyway. So there we go. Now, the reasons that were given by the perpetrators for what happened to Suzanne Capper are a little bit vague, and in my opinion, they're probably untrue. The people in the house were known to bully Suzanne anyway, and it seems much more likely that this was just an escalation of that that got way out of hand. So Bernadette McNeely accused Suzanne Capper of stealing a pink duffel coat. It seems much more likely that that was stolen by one of the other regular visitors to the house, in exchange probably for drug money and things like that. And the other reason given was that Bernadette McNeely's boyfriend, Anthony Dodson, had contracted crabs, and they put that down to Suzanne Capper sleeping in the couple's bed. Dodson later himself said he didn't believe that that was where he'd got this particular STD, but Bernadette McNeely took that out on Suzanne Capper, and this is what followed. Now, on the 7th of December 1992, Capper was lured to the Powell home. Powell, her ex-husband Glyn, and Anthony Dodson, as well as Bernadette McNeely, were all present. Suzanne Capper was restrained, and Glyn shaved her head and eyebrows, and both women then beat Capper with a belt and a wooden instrument of some sort. It couldn't find what that was in any of the reports, but she was beaten. The women took turns kicking her on the floor, and she was actually then locked in a cupboard overnight. On December 8th, she was moved from the Powell house to McNeely's house. Now, this is particularly cruel. She was moved because the screams and cries from Capper throughout the night were said to be upsetting the 6 children in the house. Once at the McNeely household, Suzanne was taken to a downstairs room where she was tied to the slats of an upturned bed with electrical cable. She was left there, and the next 5 days would prove to be absolutely horrific. Over the next 5 days, Suzanne Capper was subjected to violent physical and psychological torture, the most horrific kind you can imagine. She was also regularly injected with amphetamines, which would have kept her alert and conscious throughout most of the torture. Suzanne was regularly beaten and burned with cigarettes, and was forced to wear headphones which played rave music at full volume throughout all hours of the day and night. The song used was the track Hi, It's Chucky, Wanna Play from the film Child's Play by a rave artist called 150 Volts. Bernadette McNeely, rather horrifically, would announce her arrival to come and torture Suzanne Capper by announcing Chucky's coming to play. This phrase would induce utter terror in Suzanne Capper. At some point during the week, the group, now including Clifford Pook and Jeffrey Lee, untied Capper, who at this point had been tied to the bed frame for days and was covered in urine and feces and blood and was obviously just in a dreadful state, was untied. She was taken to an upstairs bathroom where she was forced to sit in the bath. She was scrubbed with a yard brush, disinfectant and bleach, an ordeal which again must have just been dreadfully painful. Clifford Pook then attacked Capper himself, and he attacked her with a pair of pliers, hitting her in the face and eventually going on to forcibly remove 2 of her teeth whilst laughing about it. In a rather macabre twist, these teeth were later found at Pook's household by police, which to me shows some parallels between behaviours of serial killers and criminals who often like to keep trophies of the victims. Now, I don't know if this was the case and that is what he was doing, but I certainly think we could draw some parallels there. In another horrifying twist, there were actually multiple opportunities at which Suzanne Capper could have been saved. At one point, an 18-year-old man named David Hill was in the house during this 5-day week, and Jeffrey Lee actually showed him Suzanne Capper, and David was left to keep an eye on her. Now, I don't know if this was in order so that she couldn't escape, but David had been asked basically to keep an eye on her. Suzanne Capper identified herself to David and asked for help, and tragically, David refused. David refused to help this young girl who was tied up. He'd later go on to say that this was due to fear of Jeffrey Lee. Now, personally, I don't think that's an excuse. Again, that is just my opinion. If you disagree or you know a little bit more about the case, please feel free to discuss that in the comments. Now, sometime after this, Suzanne had obviously been reported as a missing person by her family, as no one had seen her in a number of days. And upon hearing this, the group decided that the only way they could get out of this situation was to kill Suzanne Capper. On December 14th, Suzanne Capper was untied and she was forced into the boot of a stolen Fiat Panda by the group. That was McNeely, both the Powells, and Anthony Dodson. She was driven to a remote area just outside of Stockport in Greater Manchester. Once she was driven to this area, she was pushed down the side of the embankment at the side of the road. This is a very rural country sort of area. Lighter fluid was poured upon her and Bernadette McNeely set her on fire. While Suzanne was on fire, it's reported that Bernadette McNeely was singing the song Burn Baby Burn. It's just absolutely disgusting what happened to this young girl. Believing her to be dead, the group then drove away, collected some alcohol from a local store, and they returned to Jean Powell's house. Unbelievably, however, Suzanne Capper had survived this ordeal and she managed to climb up the side of the embankment and walk a quarter of a mile down the road where she managed to flag down a passing motorist. Now, this level of bravery, I think, should be absolutely commended, and it actually breaks my heart to think of this young girl. The people who picked her up noted that she was very polite, but incredibly burnt, and they described her as being featureless. The burns were so severe on Suzanne Capper. Of course, they rushed her to a nearby hospital where doctors began to try to treat what had happened to Suzanne Capper. Again, incredibly, Capper was able to give the names of her attackers as well as Jean Powell's address to the police, where she slipped into a coma and sadly never regained consciousness. The group were quickly arrested and charged with the murder of Suzanne Capper, and the court case would take place the following year on November 16th. Every member of the group tried to minimise their part in what had happened while blaming the others, but of course they were found guilty, and the sentences are as follows. Bernadette McNeely and Jean Powell received life in prison for the murder of Suzanne Capper with a minimum of 25 years. Glyn Powell also received life in prison with a minimum of 25 years. Lee received 12 years in prison. Anthony Dodson received a minimum of 18 years in prison. And Clifford Pook received 15 years in prison. Now, horrifyingly, most of these people are now out of prison. Lee was freed in 1998. Pook was freed in 2001. And Bernadette McNeely horrifically was paroled in 2015. And if a couple of posts on Facebook are to be believed, she's actually working in the Greater Manchester area, not far from where it happened, at a local Marks and Spencer's. Again, if anybody can confirm or deny that, please let me know. And there ends the horrific story of Suzanne Capper. Now, I've done my best to get all the facts right in this video. If I have made any mistakes, please let me know and I will rectify them as soon as possible. Again, like and subscribe. It really, really helps me. And thank you very much for watching. See you all next time on Grappling with Crime.